Imagine this, a luxurious penthouse suite, glittering with gold and crystal, high above the bustling city. Inside, a powerful millionaire, clad in an expensive suit, reclines on a leather sofa, his smirk as sharp as the skyline view. Across the room, an elderly black maid quietly polishes a silver tray, her back slightly stooped but her dignity unshaken. She's worked hard all her life, never asking for more than a fair chance. But to him, she's invisible, or worse, a target for mockery. Is this the best they could send? He sneers, loud enough for her to hear. His words sting, but she doesn't flinch. She's heard it all before and knows that wealth doesn't always buy respect. As he laughs, basking in his self-importance, she finishes her work and leaves, her silence louder than his taunts. But life has a way of humbling even the mightiest. The next morning, as the millionaire lounges in his suite, savoring his success, a sharp knock echoes through the room. He isn't expecting visitors. Frowning, he strides to the door, unaware that the world as he knows it is about to change. What waits behind that door? Karma, destiny, or something even more powerful? Stay tuned, because this story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. The millionaire paused at the door, his hand hovering over the polished brass handle. His confidence faltered for a moment, but he quickly dismissed the unease. Who could it be? Another delivery? A staff member? No one ever knocked on his door without a reason. He pulled it open, expecting the usual, a groveling employee or perhaps a lavish gift. Instead, he was met with a man in a sharp suit, his demeanor calm but his presence commanding. The man held a thick envelope in his hand and looked the millionaire straight in the eye. "Mr. Daniels?" he asked, his tone formal yet firm. The millionaire nodded, his curiosity piqued, but his guard still up. "What is this about?" he demanded, motioning toward the envelope. The man handed it over without hesitation. "You've been served," he said simply, before turning and walking away without another word. Confused, Daniels closed the door and tore open the envelope. His expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief as he read the contents. It wasn't just a legal document, it was a summons, linked to a claim involving the maid he had mocked the previous day. But how? Why? His mind raced as he replayed the events of the previous day. He had barely noticed her after his cruel remark. Could she have done something? Or was this someone else stepping in? He paced the room, the words on the paper blurring together in his mind. For the first time in years, the unshakable Mr. Daniels felt a twinge of fear. Something bigger was unfolding, and he wasn't in control anymore. Daniel sank into the leather chair by the window, the envelope clutched in his hand like it might bite him. The summons wasn't just about money. It hinted at something far deeper, more personal. He reread the words, trying to make sense of it. It mentioned an incident, witnesses, and even referenced a history he didn't remember creating. But who would have gone to such lengths over something so small? Surely that maid couldn't have orchestrated this. Or could she? The next day, his lawyer arrived, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Claire. She flicked through the papers with practiced precision, her calm demeanor adding to his frustration. "This isn't just a lawsuit," she said, setting the papers down. "It's a character case. They're painting you as a man who abuses power, disregards dignity. There's a record of complaints, not just this one." Daniels froze. Complaints? He dismissed staff all the time. It was business. "They're exaggerating," he snapped. But Claire's look was unyielding. "The maid you mocked, her name is Evelyn," she said. "She's not just an employee. She's a widow, a mother of 3. And she's been here longer than you have." Her words stung. Evelyn wasn't just a name now. She was a person with a life he had trampled on without a second thought. But who was backing her? The company? A benefactor? As Daniels grappled with the growing mystery, whispers began spreading through the hotel staff. Some pitied Evelyn, others resented Daniels. But one thing was clear. The once untouchable millionaire was suddenly vulnerable, and the cracks in his perfect facade were starting to show. Daniels couldn't shake the growing unease that followed him everywhere. The once confident millionaire now moved through his days like a man under siege. His phone buzzed constantly with updates from Claire, each message another blow to his carefully crafted image. The press had caught wind of the case, and whispers of his behavior were leaking beyond the hotel walls. He'd been the king of this city, but now even his closest allies were keeping their distance. The answer came in the form of another knock on his door, this time in the dead of night. Daniels opened it to find an older man in a simple suit standing there, his expression unreadable. He introduced himself as Thomas, Evelyn's eldest son. "I'm not here to threaten you," Thomas said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here to tell you a story, my mother's story. And when you hear it, you'll understand why this isn't just about what you said. It's about what men like you have done for years." Thomas stepped inside, and as he began to speak, Daniels felt the walls of his world close in. Each word was a reminder of the humanity he had ignored, the consequences of his arrogance. The truth was undeniable now. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a reckoning. As Thomas spoke, Daniels sat frozen, every word pulling him deeper into a story he had never expected to hear. Evelyn wasn't just a maid who quietly polished silver and tidied sweets. She was a woman who had endured struggles far beyond what Daniels could imagine. Her husband had been a respected community leader, wrongfully taken from her years ago in a tragedy tied to corruption. A corruption Daniels himself had unknowingly profited from in his rise to the top. Thomas laid out the details methodically, his voice steady but laced with emotion. The deals Daniels had struck, the companies he had backed, one of them had a direct link to the organization that had destroyed Thomas's family. "You may not have pulled the strings," Thomas said, his eyes locked on Daniels, "but you've benefited from a system that crushes people like us. And yesterday, when you mocked my mother, you became part of that system in a way we couldn't ignore anymore." Daniels felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just about his words or even his behavior. It was about a legacy of harm he had unwittingly perpetuated. But as Thomas rose to leave, he delivered a second, unexpected blow. "There's someone else you need to meet," he said. "Someone who's been waiting for years to confront you." Before Daniels could respond, the door opened again, and a young woman stepped inside. Her resemblance to Evelyn was striking, but her eyes burned with a determination that sent a chill down Daniels' spine. "You don't know me," she said, her voice steady, "but you've changed my life, and not for the better." Daniels was speechless, the weight of the confrontation growing heavier. His carefully constructed empire was beginning to crumble, and he was powerless to stop it. Daniels stared at the young woman, her presence both commanding and unnerving. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. She stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "My name is Grace. Evelyn is my grandmother. And the choices you've made, the deals you've closed, they didn't just hurt strangers. They tore apart my family." Her words hit like a thunderclap. Grace unfolded a series of documents, laying them on the table between them. They detailed how one of Daniels' companies had funded projects that displaced entire neighborhoods, including the one where Evelyn's family had lived. Grace's father, Evelyn's son, had fought to keep their home but lost everything in the process, leading to the downward spiral that had ultimately claimed his life. Daniels tried to respond, but the weight of the truth silenced him. He had spent years focusing on profits and power, never considering the human cost of his actions. "I didn't know," he said finally, his voice cracking. Grace shook her head. "You didn't care to know. And that's the problem." But then, to his surprise, she slid one more piece of paper across the table. It wasn't another accusation or legal document. It was an offer. "We don't want to destroy you," Grace said. "We want change, real change. We want you to use your power and resources to rebuild what you helped tear down." Daniel stared at the paper, the words blurring as his mind raced. He had a choice. Fight back and risk losing everything or face his mistakes and try to make amends. As he hesitated, Grace added, "This is your chance to prove you're more than the man we've seen. Don't waste it." With a deep breath, Daniels picked up a pen. But just as he was about to sign, Grace stopped him. "One more thing," she said, her tone sharper now. "This isn't just for us. It's for every family you've ignored along the way. And we'll be watching." Daniels nodded, realizing this wasn't just a deal. It was his reckoning. Daniel sat in silence after Grace left, the signed agreement still in his hand. The weight of everything he had ignored and dismissed over the years finally sank in. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in decades: humility. He knew this wasn't just about writing a check or funding a project. It was about taking responsibility and making things right. Over the next weeks, Daniels began meeting with Evelyn, Grace, and community leaders to understand the damage his actions had caused. It wasn't easy. Conversations were tense, and many doubted his sincerity. But he kept showing up, listening more than he spoke, learning the stories behind the statistics he had ignored. Slowly, he began channeling his resources into rebuilding the neighborhoods his companies had displaced, creating programs to support families like Evelyn's. Evelyn remained reserved but professional, treating him with the same dignity she had always shown, even when he hadn't deserved it. Grace, however, became an active partner in the efforts, ensuring Daniel stayed true to his word. She was determined to hold him accountable, not just for her family, but for everyone affected by his actions. Months later, Daniel stood at the opening of a new community center, surrounded by the people who had once been invisible to him. As he cut the ribbon, he glanced at Evelyn, standing quietly in the crowd. She gave him a small, knowing nod. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a start. Daniels had once believed wealth defined power. Now he understood true power lay in using it to uplift others. His journey wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt like he was heading in the right direction.